Nearly 3 out of 4 workers, this is about 72% according to SHRM, they say that their manager could have done more to prevent conflict and incivility at work. Did you hear that? 3 out of 4 workers. So that basically means that employees feel like their leaders just aren't equipped, or they're actively choosing not to step in when it matters the most. And honestly, they're right, because most managers, like most of us, most employees, have never been trained at how to spot conflict and incivility, how to interrupt it, how to navigate through it, how to resolve it, and how to repair and get to restorative relationships on the other side. And so it's not just an issue that employees think managers can't handle conflict. They aren't. So let's dig into why employees feel this way. It's not that managers are bad people. So I want us to be very clear. There are not people in leadership positions who are, sitting in dark rooms and rubbing their hands together and saying, I cannot wait for my team to get into conflict. I'm going to do nothing, and then end with a cackle. Generally, managers care very deeply about their teams, and especially the well-being of the people that's under their, supervision. But here's why they often fall short when it comes to conflict. I would say first, and I'm saying this after, over a decade of specifically training and building the skills of folks to get better at conflict management and conflict navigation. It's lack of training. In general, in our private lives, at least in the United States, we are very conflict averse, which is counter to what you might see in the comment sections on social media. There's conflict there all the time, right? There's people being very direct, very assertive / aggressive. But that's not how most people are when they're not cloaked behind a screen and a keyboard. We are conflict averse, and so we don't want to engage in conversations that look like accountability, and we often don't even know how. I think it's also important to even think about how managers are often promoted. So if you look at how we hire someone into some kind of a role where they're delivering a service, and then they become the top performer of that service, and then they get promoted into management, and now their role is about people management and coaching and the professional development of the people that's underneath them in the organizational chart. That's different than being promoted from a high performer to now the highest performer of the highest performers, right? You are a manager. So when we're promoted for our performance and not for our people management skills or our conflict skills, it's no surprise that when conflict or incivility or disrespect shows up, it gets unmanaged, because no one's ever taught them how to handle tough conversation. And also, there's not a playbook that tells people exactly what to do, exactly what to say to make sure that they are better at conflict, that they're able to squash it on their team before it festers and escalate. We just don't have that skill. And so if we don't have that skill, then we can't be surprised that there's a skill gap when it comes to conflict on our teams. I think the other part of this is just recognizing that managers are human, just like non-managers. And managers generally want to be liked, and I don't care what they say. I used to work with an ornery guy who said he didn't care about anybody. He was giving very much Ron Swanson vibes from that show Parks and Recreation. But inside did care that they were liked, that they were respected, and that they had a level of, say, professional friendship with their team. And so stepping into conflict, addressing the conflict, holding a mirror up to somebody and showing them that their words and actions had a negative impact and they're going to be held accountable, risks relationships. And it risks not being liked. And I think that's one of the reasons that managers also don't intervene the way that they could. A third thing that I often think about when it comes to why folks and people in management don't intervene, I go back to this study that came out. I want to say it was really a story that came out in the New York Times, maybe 2000 or 2001. And the article was about microaggressions. And they quoted one of the top researchers on the topic, Dr. I want to say Nadal, Nadal, who writes and teaches on microaggressions. And I'll never forget the stat because it mirrored almost what I was seeing in my work, almost to the exact percent. 60% of people don't speak up when they see a microaggression, or as I could call it, an identity-based slight, slur, or harm. And we see it. and we know that it's wrong, and we know that someone should say something, but we don't say something. 60% of people don't say something. And when they probed why, there's a number of factors, but largely it's that we don't want to make a mistake. We're not sure if it's our responsibility. Should they work it out themselves, or should I intervene as a third person? And so we start to tread this water of doing it right, being perfect, who should speak up. I don't know the topic. I'm not an expert. I'm not the conflict mediator expert. And so we do nothing. And so 60% watch as something really bad is happening and we don't do anything. And so this goes back to my first point about we have to get upskilled in order to be able to be the 40% who does speak up and say something. Here's the fourth reason. Avoidance feels easier. I've worked with so many clients and I'll say, you've contracted me to come to your organization and to help you all build conflict resiliency. Was there a spark that happened? Was there something that happened that led you to say, we have got to address the impact of the conflict, right? And sometimes I don't know why. I assume that something recently happened, which is why they've just called me in. But more often than not, the issue was from a long time ago, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Once it was 3 years ago that this acts of incivility, of disrespect, of belittling happened, and it didn't get addressed. And everything just kind of built on top of that break of trust and that erosion of psychological safety. Now, that is avoidance. And at the time, it probably felt easier than to say something and to hold people accountable. But in fact, it's actually not easier because it led to increased stress of every team meeting, every time those folks had to collaborate with one another, every time there was an employee pulse survey and it came back that people are not well here, psychologically, stress, mental health, etc. It all stemmed from that unresolved thing that happened. That felt easier just to kind of sweep it under the rug and hopefully it works itself out. And I will tell you, more often than not, things do not work themselves out. So even though avoidance feels easier, it can make problems worse in the long time. So those are like 4 reasons or 4, I'd say reasons why I think employees, 7 of 10, don't believe their managers are managing conflict in the way that they should. Now, I've talked about this a little bit already, but I want to touch a little bit deeper about, what does avoidance look like? Because I was doing an assessment of some surveys that we've done in our company on workplace conflict, and I also went to Reddit. That's a great place if you want to kind of see what people are talking about when it comes to conflict and culture. And here were some themes that I both saw in our data at Wilson & Associates, but then also on Reddit. So a lot of people name that the people who keep having negative impact, like they call them the troublemakers, they're allowed to say stuff, to do stuff, to behave in ways and stir things up, and there is no accountability. They just kind of get to run like it's the wild, wild west, where people can do whatever they want without any recourse. The other thing that we've seen is that managers will often tell their team members, you guys just work it out. And I will say that I feel like a lot of the times this isn't coming from a place of avoidance. I do think that there's a trend in the modern workplace for managers to not micromanage their people and to empower team members to solve their own problems without having to get the boss involved. But sometimes people do need a manager. They do need that person that has a level of seniority and authority to step in and reaffirm this is our culture, and the behavior that happened is antithetical. It is opposite to the culture we have in place. Let's get everybody back on track. But the comment of just working it out can feel very dismissive, and it doesn't provide the guidance to get teams to a resolution. The other part of this too, and this is in my company, we call it the conflict resilience formula. We talk about that you need 3 components to really manage conflict, not just in the moment that it happens, but for the lifetime of your team. And it has to do with 1, emotional intelligence and how we build that and our mental fitness. The second is how we build inclusive and equity-centered relationships. And then the third is the conflict infrastructure. And it's within the conflict infrastructure when you hear me talk about holding folks accountable, what is our culture, what is acceptable or not, your conflict infrastructure actually gives people the playbook about how they can and should behave to be in alignment with the company's culture. culture. Something that just came to my mind, another way of thinking about why there might be inaction is that the conflict gets misdiagnosed. So it made me think of this story. So I had a client and we were doing some strategic planning and change management work. And in that particular contract, there were two employees that were really just, there was always a passive aggressive comment, a dismissive, look. There was always just something. Right? This is a client that was calling them interpersonal dynamics. They just have an interpersonal dynamic. They're like oil and water. They don't actually get along. And that was a diagnosis, that there wasn't any, as my client said, there's no there. There's no issue. There's no conflict. Really, they just don't get along. So the issue is just to kind of keep them apart. Right? Just if they aren't apart, the issue is resolved. But that actually was a misdiagnosis of the conflict, because in our work, we often will do one-on-one interviews to help do a company culture profile. And when my team talked to these two folks, we realized that in the change that we were helping to facilitate, we were one of a team of consultants. We do the people change management aspect. In the change that was being ushered in, there was elimination of some roles and changing of roles. So these two people weren't just having what looked like an interpersonal personality clash. There was also misinformation. There was role overlap, and the two of them didn't have the language or even the knowledge to speak it to leadership. They just knew that they were stepping on each other's toes. They felt like one person was trying to take credit or do the work of the other. And it was that lack of role clarity that actually was the root of the conflict. And some feelings of feeling like management should have known better. Like, how dare you get rid of these positions? You create these new roles. Now we have these new jobs and new roles, and I keep doing stuff, and this person's stepping on my toes and vice versa. Why didn't you catch that? Why are we the ones catching this structural issue as we live out this tension and the conflict? Here's my recommendation. The first thing is, when you see disrespect, you hear grumblings, you see eye rolls or passive aggressive comments or belittling. Anytime you see any of that, step in, call it out. Not the people, not to blame people or disrespect them or make them feel bad or guilty, but call out the behavior as essentially, that's not how we talk to each other here. That's not how we do things here. We're respectful here. I want to invite you to maybe say that again, but draw a line in the sand about what is acceptable and step in early. The other thing, and I can't underscore this enough, is that we've got to build our emotional intelligence skills. And that includes empathy. So looking at things from multiple perspectives and really listening to the people who are involved in the matters of incivility or disrespect. This is the thing that's going to be hard for many managers, but I invite you to really do it. We've got to be better about holding people accountable. We just have to. So here's the thing. If 72% of workers say their managers could be doing more, that isn't just feedback. And even though that's a SHRM statistic, you might want to get curious about what people on your team or your workplace say. Because if 72% of folks say that their managers could be doing more when it comes to incivility or conflict, that isn't just the feedback. That is a mandate. And that's why I believe that the future of leadership, the future of work, has to include conflict competence. If you want to build your conflict competence, I want to invite you to take a quiz. I will link that into the description. And it's a short assessment. It helps you assess, what is the state of conflict resilience in your organization. Highly recommend it. Maybe it's 10 questions, but it'll start to give you a blueprint of where to start specifically with conflict. And if you want a blueprint specifically about building a great company culture, we've got a guide for that too. It's the 12 essential elements of great company culture, and it will help you figure out where can you begin to invest time and resources and really dedicate real commitment to building a great company culture where conflict doesn't sideline and sidetrack everything that you put in place to help people come to work, do well, be well, and feel supported. Make sure to like and subscribe. They'll let you know when I have a video coming out, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.